Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today we're going to be talking about giving characters unique voices. So we have an existing video on creating character voice, but the challenge of creating character voice is really exponentially increased in terms of difficulty when you start to write in multiple points of view. If you're writing in multiple points of view, ideally the reader should be able to open to any page and within a paragraph know whose point of view they're in because the voices are that distinct. But doing so is easier said than done. This is probably one of the greatest challenges of writing in multiple points of view. It is certainly not easy. So when talking about writing in multiple points of view, we're actually going to start with an exercise. I love a good writing exercise. I know you guys love a good writing exercise. Before we talk about any tips, we're gonna begin with an exercise. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna pick a scene that does not happen in your book. So it's not a plot point in your book, but it is in your story's world. So if your book is contemporary, it's a contemporary scene, probably in the setting, the town or city that your book is set in. If your book is set in a fantasy world, you pick a scene that could happen in that fantasy world. Now what you're gonna do is write this same scene from all your main characters' points of view. Now what I don't mean here is, let's say you have 3 point of view characters. What you're not gonna do is write a scene that all of them are in and then write that same scene from all their points of view. Just one of them in the scene at a time and they're the protagonist. This is going to be basically your litmus test. If when you read these scenes back, there's a clear distinction in voice, great, you're on the right track. Maybe you've developed the voices adequately enough and your work here is pretty much done. But if they all sound pretty similar and you're not really able to distinguish their voices, then you've got some work to do. Carefully read these excerpts and examine the differences in voice, even if for now they're subtle. You can then kind of exaggerate those qualities and use them to develop the voice further. If you're not successful with this exercise the first time, I definitely recommend coming back to it later, do more work to develop the characters' voices, and once you think you're on the right track, come back, do the exercise again, and see if you can repeat it a bit more successfully. So let's say you need to distinguish your characters' voices a little more. How can you do that? The first way is through tone. Overall tone is a great technique to distinguish multiple narrators because it will be consistently present. Although it's great to say that if a character is a fisherman, then they will use more fish-related metaphors compared to your other character, who is a librarian and so will use book-related metaphors, these things will not be consistently present, whereas tone is kind of a consistent aspect and atmosphere throughout the whole book. Tone is the attitude that the narrator takes towards the story. So if one character has a much more casual view towards the story, one has a very serious view towards the story, and one has a very humorous view towards the story, this can really distinguish the voices just through the tone. So identify how each of your character feels about the story and their own telling of the story. Next up is through narrative device. Many writers choose different points of view or different tenses to distinguish multiple voices, so writing one character's voice in first person and one in third person. Writing one character's point of view as letters, writing one just as narrative. If there is a good reason for this, it can be a good technique. I will say, personally, I'm not really a fan of it. If I'm reading a book and I feel like the only reason one character is told in first person and another in third is just to distinguish the voice, I'm not a huge fan of the technique. It feels a bit contrived and it feels like the author kind of just took a shortcut. But if there's a logical, logistical reason for that that makes sense, it's definitely something you can play around with. Next up is word choice. Word choice is so important when creating voice. In fact, voice is really built on word choice. There's a technique that I like to use called linguistic ecosystems. It's not as complicated or pretentious as it sounds. Basically what I do is just make a list of words that fit my story's atmosphere, trying to match the sounds of the words and the connotations of the words to the story's atmosphere. So if it's a story with a very soft atmosphere, creating a list of very soft sounding words that have very soft images. You can do the same thing to create character voice by creating linguistic ecosystems, and I use it in quotes because it's just random term that I made up, not an official thing, but I think it's pretty cool. You can use that same technique for different character voices to create more distinction between characters. And finally is to do actual character building work and make sure their personalities are distinct. Ideally, a character's personality is shown through their voice. A great character voice gives us a sense of the character's personality right from the first page. Think of some of your favorite opening paragraphs or pages. I bet a lot of them are strong because they really give a strong sense of personality. If you're struggling to distinguish your characters' voices, maybe it's because you need to go a few steps back and actually do more character building, make the characters themselves more distinct, develop their personalities and their background more, that will then shine through in their narrative voice. So that is how to distinguish character voice, especially in a multi-point of view novel. But you can still, of course, apply these tips to just a single point of view novel. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time.